You know, biodynamics was just it was basically the way Barb and I were leading our lives before Cowhor. So we had a number of organic friends, and they were saying that the organic standard was being kind of co-opted to some extent. So they were like, you know, cast a broad net and see what might, you know, float your boat in terms of, you know, farming systems. And Barb actually found biodynamics, and we looked at it and we said, wow, it's a common sense approach to farming. It's a very inclusive group, and you know, again, no pesticides, herbicides, that type of thing. So we were very intrigued, but really what cinched the deal was Barb went to a biodynamic farmers meeting in Sonoma and called me up on my cell and said, these are our friends, you know, same reverence for the earth, a same common sense approach to farming, but a very inclusive group. It's not like I got a secret, you figure it out. It's more like, I found something, here, you take it, you know? And so that meeting just kind of cinched it. And then Barb met Alan York, and Alan, until he passed away, was our biodynamic consultant. And, you know, Alan was just great. And, you know, so our introduction to biodynamics, we weren't farmers before this. So our introduction was via the people, and the people were just great. You know, we had, when folks found out that we were going to do grapes, Doug Tunnell up at Brick House, and, you know, said, come on up, I'll show you what I do and why. He's biodynamic. And then Mike Benzinger down, you know, said, come on down, I'll show you what I do and why. So again, a very inclusive group. And that's what led us into biodynamics.
So tell me about your property, how many acres you have, your aspect, elevation, your winds, your varietals.
Mm-hmm. So the farm is 118 acres total. 45 acres of that is the mountainside that you can see in Maureen's back. There's another 25 or so acres that fronts the Applegate River. So we have about 55 acres that we can plant. Right now we have about 25 acres planted, all Rhones, except for a tinge of Tempranillo. You know, we have Syrah and Grenache on the red side, and then we have Viognier, Marsanne and Roussanne on the white side. Our elevation is about 1,600 feet right here at the floor where the vineyard is.
Okay, great. Thank you. And how have you diversified your property to meet the requirements of biodynamic farming?
That's a good question. So, you know, one of the primary aspects of biodynamics is there's no monocropping. So at Cowhorn, besides the grapes, we do asparagus. We did 5,500 pounds of asparagus this year. Over Maureen's left shoulder is actually our asparagus field. And so it's that's 2 acres of asparagus, about 15,000 crowns that are now about this big, produces 5,500 or so pounds per year. What you're seeing now is after we stop picking it, the spears will continue to grow, and they grow into a fern, which you're seeing. And then through photosynthesis, it rejuvenates the root ball for the next year. So we've been producing asparagus since 2000. Well, the first acre went in 2006. The second acre went in 2008.
Well, I'd just like to acknowledge that your asparagus is highly desired in Southern Oregon, and it sells out in the local markets like within an hour.
It is a fan favorite. I tell a story, you know, it's about every year I'll go into the Ashland Co-op or the Medford Co-op, and people know what I do. They don't really know my name. And so they'll come up and they'll say, you know, Mr. Asparagus, is it almost time? You know, and I'm like, well, it's mid-April to mid-June. We also have 1,000 lavender plants, and we have about 40 hazelnut trees. They're hazelnut and oak now that are all inoculated with black Perigord truffle. So we clearly don't monocrop.
Okay. Have you been harvesting the truffles yet?
Technically, no. We found some. They're awfully small, and we did a pivot last year. A guy found out about our project who's out of Australia, and he came over and said it's some of the best soil he's ever seen a truffle tree put in.
Uh,
And he found them. I mean, he found them, Maureen, within a minute. And
uh,
but they were very small. And he said, well, the soil is excellent. You know, what's your irrigation pattern? And I was actually irrigating for the tree.
uh-huh.
And he said, no, you need to irrigate for the truffle. So instead of infrequent deep waterings, we've pivoted to more frequent shallow waterings. Again, to keep the truffle moist and hopefully get it to expand.
Interesting, interesting. You're not dry farming, are you?
No,
Yeah.
we don't. A dry farm. Cowhorn is adjacent to the Applegate River.
You have water rights.
Yep. And we've picked over 5,000 tons of rock off the property. So
That's a great segue to the next question, which is your substantial and beautiful buildings that you've got there. You've got some unusual certifications with those constructions.
Well, the tasting room was built to living building certified. So living building certification, if you're so inclined, you can go after anywhere from 1 to 35 achievements. And Barb and I and the team at Greenhammer, who built it, with Barb's help, of course, we just said, let's see if we can get 10 to 15. Let's just cast the wide net. In 2018, we were notified that we'd gotten all 35.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's almost impossible.
That's what they tell us. And so we're the 20th building in the world to have gotten all 35.
And the first tasting room, is that not correct?
And the first tasting room and the smallest business.
Oh, that's congratulations.
Thank you.
We've followed your path over these years. Congratulations.
Thank you. So it's really, we're pleased because it's consistent with the biodynamic brand of Cowhorn, right? The building is, very, very green. What I'm also very pleased about is that as a community, about 62 subs in Southern Oregon came together to build this crazy thing. They all had to relearn. You had to relearn techniques. They had to relearn applications, products, the whole thing. And everybody bought into, let's just try. And so, as I said, we got all 35.
All right, well, thank you so much. Moving on to sort of the next question, which isn't as, I guess, pleasurable to answer. This last 6 months has been difficult on the retail side for many institutions. Can you tell me how you've coped and compensated with the last 6 months quarantine?
It's been a day-to-day adventure, to be honest with you. Certainly when the restaurants are closed, that's about a third of our business that went to zero. When the tasting room in Oregon was closed for several months, that number also went to zero. But we've reopened. We reopened very prudently. We are not going to cram that thing full of appointments. We're going by appointment only. We are practicing social distancing between every group. We are not allowing groups greater than 6 into the building or onto the property. So the goal is to make the staff feel safe and to make the customer feel safe. And I think we've done that. And so when people get here, they know that we're biodynamic. They know that there's no chemicals in the field, there's no chemicals in the wines, but they feel like, okay, this whole pandemic thing, that Cowhorn has taken a lot of precaution to keep us all safe. And so then they'll sit down and they can actually enjoy the tasting and get away from the real world for about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're tippy-toeing back into it.
And I think you've got a number of different venues outside that are just beautiful and pleasant to be there. Between the
cabanas.
Yes, and then there's a garden area with a stream, so it's quite a lovely spot.
Thank you. Yeah, and we can keep people fairly. If people are really concerned but still want to come out, there's one table that's about 15 to 17 feet away from everybody else, and you can access that table by going around the back. So, if you're concerned about people contact or anything, then there's an avenue to make those people feel welcome and safe.
Have you made any changes over the last year to the tasting room or the vineyard, your operations or place?
No, not really. I mean, we've obviously in the tasting room, we've taken extra precaution.
Mhm.
You know,
And
I
you
think
talked
going
about the
to,
truffles.
but well, the truffles, we've done that. I mean, we're always kind of, you know, changing things in the vineyard. It's kind of fun. Part of being biodynamic is you can explore the vineyard. And Barb and it's done a great job since 2004 of taking really excellent notes and creating very extensive databases. So she can literally tell you every 2 weeks, you know, like mid-July, which season are we closest to, going all the way back to 2005. And so what we've done under Alan's tutelage is every year we would write down what did we do and what would we have done differently. So you know that human brain tends to forget the bad things.
Yeah.
And so we can every 2 weeks we're like, okay, this is closer to 2009. What would we have done differently in 2009? 2009 actually we would have watered earlier, longer. So we can make these pivots. So we're making those pivots right now. The other thing we're doing a little differently is the order of which things get accomplished. So for example, back in the day, 2010, Viognier blocks were somewhat challenging. So they started to get extra TLC. They got everything first, you know, pruning, thinning, suckering, the whole thing. Well, believe it or not, all that TLC worked. The Viognier block, which we're now working on, is actually the last block because I am trying to slow that thing down. All that TLC took it from slightly less than ripe to way ripe. You know, we're pushing 24 bricks, and I don't need that. So
Wow.
so that's part of our ongoing, you know, being in the vineyard every day, collecting good, you know, good records on vineyard practices, but also wine, you know, practices. So each one of these wines have got, you know, the bricks, pH, TA, yawns, going back to the first year we made wine. So
Nice.
and we also do the same thing with our barrels. So
Thank you.
mm-hmm.
So you're not working with a vineyard management company. You've got all that taken care of in-house. Is that correct?
We are working, we're working with Pacific Crest Services.
Ah, okay.
We started working with Jason Cole.
Jason Cole does a good job.
But oh, he does a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a really good job, and so he works at Rhone.
I was just going to say that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so Jason, you know, I don't want to speak for him, but he likes biodynamic and organic vineyards and farms for that matter. And so, you know, when we were looking for somebody, he was a natural, and so we have right now we're kind of more of an informal arrangement this year. They're actually here right now, and we're just kind of sopping up extra days as he makes them available for us.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I think he really walks the talk.
Oh yeah.
Walks the walk, walks the talk. I don't know what that is, but
walks the walk, talks the talk.
He's got it.
Yeah, he does. He does, and
he does a great job.
He's very inquisitive. I think the one thing that we learned, you know, from Alan and I think Barb and I's personality is that you don't ever really get it right. You just learn, and so people that talk at you, I'm not really interested. I want somebody, you know, especially a partner like, you know, Jason, to join us on the journey of exploration and being honest. You know, we just you know, if something doesn't work, it's not a bad thing if it doesn't work. It's just an avenue you went down that you know not to go down there anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And you just have to be what I call intellectually honest to be that way.
So how would you define your winemaking style? I know that you're directly involved in making that wine on a daily basis. You're everywhere. You do it.
That's a good question. I don't really have gotten that much. What is my winemaking style? I would say that, you know, Barbara and my goal is to allow the plants to express them as fully as possible, as naturally as possible. Mm-hmm. And so that again is, you know, begins in the vineyard, data collection. It translated into the winery from as soon as we get them in. I have created 3 different press programs for my wines that are they're unique. They're they're mine. And so that allows me to, put a little bit of a Cowhorn imprint into the wines. We also use native yeasts. So the yeasts that live here are what we use to ferment the juice. And so I think it's all this kind of natural style. And it's not, we're not flipping the coin and hoping and guessing. It's really a lot of thoughtful analysis, barrel selection, equipment selection, and knowing, like one time somebody asked me, what temperature do you like your reds to go through? And I said, well, somewhere between 89 and 91 degrees. And the gal said, well, there's only one number between 89 and 91 degrees, right? It's 90. And so, yeah, we like it at 90 degrees, and we endeavor to get it there, through, proper winemaking. So again, it's the idea is to allow the plants to express themselves as fully as possible, as naturally as possible.
And I think you've had that
sideline to
philosophy
that is,
consistently over time.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing that we really are quite proud of, is that we can do it consistently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When you think of your wines, are you looking for any particular values or qualities in making those wines? If you think of Spiral, for example.
I want them to be as clean as possible.
Okay.
I think I read, is there 260 ingredients that we can put in wines now without disclosing to the customer? And we don't put any. And so I just want them, I want to babysit them or baby them or work with them day to day to allow them to express themselves and as clean as possible. And I like that when people notice that in the wines, that they're, oh, your wines are so clean, clean tasting. And that's because there's nothing in there. I mean, I've always gone to the extent of actually making my own sulfites. I take pure SO2 gas and I diffuse it through distilled water to a certain concentration. So I know what's in our wines are certified biodynamic grapes, a little bit of SO2, and a little bit of distilled water, and that's it.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to your wines, and it would be great if you could present your wines to us now.
Sure. Okay, this first wine is our 2019 Marsanne and Roussanne blend. So it's 50% Marsanne, 50% Roussanne. It is from 2019. It's co-fermented. So that means that, we pick the Marsanne and Roussanne on the same day, and it goes into the press together, and it starts off its journey together. So it is co-fermented. Again, we use the native yeasts that live out there to ferment the juice. It is barrel fermented, 20% new French oak and 80% neutral French oak is in this wine. So they're very, very good complementary varietals. The Roussanne gives it some structure and some minerality, and the Marsanne will give it some mouthfeel and a little bit of weight, and occasionally a little bit of like this fruitiness. It's a very dry wine. All of my whites are dry. Anything 10 grams of residual sugar and below per liter is considered a dry wine. 0 is bone dry. This one is 0.3. So it's virtually bone dry. And I kind of like that. That's maybe a little bit Barb and I style is, sweet wines they can get cloying and they're not really always food friendly. Yep, well, that's the Marsanne Roussanne. It's just you'll see when you taste it, it's got really good structure. That's the Roussanne. It's got a nice long finish. It's to my palate, it's very clean. And then there's just little nice round mouthfeel that comes from the Marsanne grape. As I mentioned, dry, very food friendly with that acid. We have acid in spades across all of the wines. The acid will make this a really good food-friendly wine. Very popular with, the shellfish and fish and chicken and pork and Asian food. There are no rules anymore. a wine that you like will pair with a food that you like.
I just want you to know I haven't had lunch, so you're making me hungry.
Well, me too. This next wine, this is our 2016 Moonraker. So this is a red blend of Syrah, Grenache, and Tempranillo. It's a little bit more, so, you know, actually another thing about the wine making, you know, Barb and I don't want to be held to a recipe. We want to be held to a standard. So the Moonraker is always Syrah, Grenache, Tempranillo, but the percentages will vary.
Yeah.
You know, some years it's a little bit more Syrah dominated. Some years it's a little bit more Grenache dominated. And it just depends upon the expressiveness.
Yeah.
You know, we've made it enough that over the years we know, okay, that's right. Is it 50% Grenache or 50% Syrah? That's, again, that's you know, vintage variability. It'll all taste kind of the same because the Grenache is kind of the light berry fruit, the strawberry, cherry, and the Syrah's got this kind of darker fruit, earth. And then the Tempranillo, which is always a splash, you know, 5%-ish. That'll give it a little bit of this cocoa thing, you know, cocoa, chocolate, and that's that. This was also right now, it's got a little bit of what I call dusty sugar in it. So this has got about 30% new French oak, 70% neutral French oak, but it's also got about 30 to 35% whole cluster. So grapes grow on clusters. So Barb and I will take, you know, 1 out of every 3, and we don't destem it. And we put it into the 2-ton fermenter with the destemmed grapes, and to our palate, the whole cluster gives it structure, a little bit more structure, a little bit more spice.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is create what I call tension in the wine from the beginning to the end. And you want consistent tension. You don't want a mid-palate spike, you know, because then also your finish seems weak, nor do you want a mid-palate hole. So it's that whole cluster, and will help to keep things a little bit more consistent from start to finish. So that's Moonraker. So Moonraker, some people will ask about the story. Most people think it's a James Bond movie. It's not. So Moonrakers actually started in the 1600s, I believe, in Europe. And what the people were doing is they were floating caskets of brandy down the river illegally, right, during Prohibition. And they'd float them down at night, and then they would pull them off with these large rakes, right? And so one time the constables came up upon these 2 guys, and they said, "What are you doing with the rakes?" And they said, "Oh," and they saw the moon was reflecting in the river. And they said, "Well, we're trying to get the cheese off the river." and the constable said, "Well, that's silly." And they moved on, and then they got their barrels and continued on their way. So what Moonraker actually means, it's a silly little story. And so aren't all James Bond movies silly little stories? So that's the connection. And sometime along, I mean, Barb's really good about finding these things out. Part of Cowhorn's mission statement is to educate and inspire. And you can't inspire without educating. So she found this whole hidden meaning behind Moonraker, and it's right up our alley. Because you can slow people down. You know, say, "Well, why Moonraker?" And you tell them, and then they go, "That's great." You know, and then they can share it with their friends over a bottle of wine at dinner. You know. So anyway, that's Moonraker. And our last wine is also a 2016 red blend, and this is called Deuce. This is a blend of Syrah and Grenache. It's 70% Syrah, 30% Grenache. That doesn't also tell the whole story. We actually grow 7 different types of Syrahs here at the property. So the way I explain it to folks, think about when you and I go to the grocery store and shop for apples. So we see apples, and then underneath that sign you see Fuji, Brave, Granny Smith, Golden Delicious. They're all apples, but they're each very different. That is true of our Syrahs. So what we did in 2016 is we took the most Grenache-like Syrah to blend with Grenache. right? And the idea is, you know, when you're blending, you want compatibility. You don't want them fighting. You want them, you know, to enjoy each other. And we found that this kind of, there's in block 5 Syrah, there's a clone that actually just, you know, really is almost Grenache-like. And so it marries very well with the Grenache. So you do, you know, it's about 70% Syrah, 30% Grenache, but to a lot of people, it's almost like a Grenache dominated blend, you know, but it's not, at least not in this year. So again, you know, you're going to get these kind of fruitiness, both from the Grenache as well as the Syrah. You get the acid in spades because everything's acidic here, and because of the whole cluster, this also has got about 30% or 35% whole cluster. You're going to get this really nice structure and long finish, which will make it a very food-friendly wine.
Okay, great. All right, Bill, thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to add that I haven't brought out either through questions or conversation?
No, I think you've hit all the highlights. I mean, we're biodynamic, we enjoy it. It is a personal preference. I like the fact that there is no hazmat suit at Cowhorn. So, you know, the kids, cousins, nephews, nieces, dogs can be here 365 days a year. And again, it's not a magic bullet. We don't, you know, claim that. It's just that, you know, it's just the way that Barb and I like to lead our life and like to tend our farm.
Well, thank you so much for making good wine and for caring for the land.
Well, thank you.
I'm so grateful to you for both of those things.
Well, thank you.
All right. All right.